Title 49 CFR 234-1 Scope Subpart A General. These are the grade crossing safeties. 234-1 Scope. This part prescribes minimum 1 maintenance inspection testing standard for the highway railway grade crossing warning system. 2 standard for the reporting of the failures highway rail grade crossing warning system for the actions that the railroad must take when such malfunctions. Requirements in particular identified states to develop the state highway grade crossings action plan. Requirement that a certain railroad establishment system for the receiving toll-free telephone calls reporting the various unsafe conditions at highway railway grade crossing and path grade crossing, or for the taking of a certain in response to those calls. Requirement of the reporting periodically updating information contained in the U.S. Department of Transportation National Highway Rail Crossing Inventory for highway rail and pathway crossings. This part does not restrict the railroad from adopting and enforcing additional more stringent requirements not inconsistent with this part. 234.3 Application of responsibility with exemption of statute 234.11. This part applied with all the railroad except for the following operations: plant railroad as defined in statute 234.5. Rapid transit operations in urban area are not connected with the general railroad system for the transportation towards scenic historic excursion operation conducted only with the track used and exclusively for the purpose of there is no freight in intercity for the passenger commuter the passenger railroad operation on the track only on one track inside the installation the insular i.e. the operation with the limited to the separate NK for such of the way that there is no responsible expectation that safety of the public except for the business guest the license of the railroad and affiliated entity of the trespasser would affect the operation of the operation noted considered insular at one or more of the following exist on the line. A public highway rail grade crossing that is in use, a grade railway crossing, and the use of bridge over the public of the road, water for use for the commercial navigation for a common corridor with the railroad and i.e. its operations with the air within 30 feet of those railroads. Although the duties imposed with the particular general state within terms of the duty of the railroad, each person, including the contractor, subcontractor for the railroad, who performs any of the tasks covered in this part, shall perform the task in accordance with this part. Alright, statute 234.5, as used in this part, definitions. Action and failure. Means of the failure of the active highway, railway, grade crossing warning system to indicate the approach of the train at least 20 seconds prior to the train's arrival at the crossing, indicate with the presence of the train occupying with the crossing unless otherwise provided with an alternative means for the active warning for the highway where users approaching train for the failure, indicate to the motorist that it is safe to proceed across the railroad tracks when in fact it is not safe to do so. Railroad grade crossing signal does not indicate the approach of the train when meaning of the paragraph is more than 50% of the flashing lights and no gate arm or lights on an approachable lane to the crossing are non-functional as intended, or in the cause of approach of the lane when which 2 or more pairs of the flashing lights are provided that is not at least 1 flashing light and pair of operating as intended. Backlights on the far side of the crossing are not considered in making these determinations. Appropriately equipped with a flag means that a person other than the train crew member who is equipped with a vest and shirt and jacket with a color appropriate for the day of time flagging such as orange, yellow, or strong yellow, green, or for lesser version of the colors other than generally accepted highway visibility colors. For the nighttime flagging, similar outside garments show the retro-reflective of the acceptable the single device for the daytime flagging, including stop, slow, paddle for the red flag. For nighttime flagging, the flashlight, lantern, and other lighted signals should be used in so much that the Part 6 of the Federal Highway Administration Manual for the Uniform Traffic Control Device addresses standard guide for the flaggers and flagging equipment for the highway traffic control. FRA recommends the railroad to be aware of the standard of the following the greatest extent with a possible copy of the MUT CD provisions regarding the flagging will be available from the FRA as well as the FMS, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, as changes are made in the area. Credit report of the warning system malfunction. Credible report of the warning system malfunction at a highway grade crossing means a reporting of the containing specific information regarding a malfunction of the highway rail grade crossing warning system and identified with the highway grade crossing supplemented applied with the railroad employee with the law enforcement officer, highway traffic officer, or other employee of a public agency active with official capacity. FRA activation means an activation for the highway grade crossing warning the system caused by a condition that requires direction with the repair of the grade crossing warning system. This is a failure to indicate to the motorist that it is safe to cross the railroad tracks where in fact it is safe to do so. FRA means Official Railroad Safety of Federal Road Administration at 1200 New Jersey Avenue, Southeast Washington, D.C. 20590. Highway grade crossing means location of the public highway, road, or private roadway, including associated sidewalk pathways across one's more railroad tracks at the grade. Partial activation means activation of highway grade crossing and warning system indicating the approach of the train. However, the fully intended warning is not provided due to one of the following conditions. 1. Non-gated crossing equipped with one pair of lights designated with flash alternative. One of the two lights does not operate properly, and approaching the motorist cannot clearly see the flashing black lights from the warning lights on the other side of the crossing. At the gate crossing of the gate of the arm in the horizontal position. 3. The grade crossing any portion of the is missing the portion of the normally had a gate arm flashing light attached. Plant railroad means the plant of the installation that owns the lease or locomotive the use of the locomotive to switch throughout the plant of the installation, move the goods solely for the use of the facility owned industrial process. The plant installation could include the track immediately adjacent to the plant and installation if the plant railroad lease of the track of the general railroad system lease for the provided the actual practice entail for the exclusive use for the trackage by plant railroad and general system railroad and purpose for the moving. Only cars shipped to and from the other plant installation that operates locomotive to switch and move for the cars for the other entities, even if solely within the confinement of the plant installation rather than its own purpose. The industrial process will not be considered for the plant railroad because of the performance of such activity makes for the operation of the general railroad system of transportation. Train means one or more of the locomotives with or without cars. Warning system malfunction. Warning system malfunction for the highway rail grade crossing means the activation failure of the partial activation of the false activation of the highway grade crossing warning system. Penalties. Civil penalty that any person or any type of the covered in Title 1 U.S. Standard Code 1, but not limited to the following: a railroad manager, supervisor, official with other employee, agent of the railroad, any owner, manufacturer, lessor, or leaser of the railroad equipment, track facilities, any independent contractor providing with the goods and services of the railroad, any employee of the such owner of the manufacturer, leaser, or lessor, independent contractor who violates the requirements of this part, except for the violation of Statute 234.11 of this part, or case of the violation of any such requirements, and subject to civil penalty of at least $650, but not more than $25,000 per violation, except for that penalties may be assessed against individuals only for willful violations where they grossly negligent violation parent to the repeated violations that have created imminent hazard of the death, injury to personnel, has caused death and injury. To penalty not to exceed $105,000 per violation may be assessed. Each day the violation continues constitutes a separate offense. Appendix A to this part contains the scheduled civil penalty amount for the connection with this rule. The railroad is not responsible for compliance with respect to any condition in the consistency of the technical standards. Set forth in this part with such of the variances arise for the result of the action beyond the control of the railroad. Railroad could not have then prevented the variance through the exercise of the diligence of the foregoing sentence. It does not include excuse the instance of the non-compliance resulting from the action of the railroad employee and agent contractor. Civil penalty: whoever knowingly or willfully makes and cause for the made to participate in this make of the false entry of the reports reported to be filed by this part of the files of the false report order. The other document required to be filed with this part, except for this document filed in pursuant to 234.11 of this part, is subject to the $5,000 fine or 2 years imprisonment as prescribed in Title 49 U.S. Standard Code 2522A and 2131A. Subpart B, report plans. Accident involving the grade crossing signal failure. 234.7. Each railroad shall report the FRA impact between the track of the railroad equipment, automatic, motorcycle, bicycle, farm, vehicle, pedestrian, highway grade crossing involving the activation notification shall provide with the National Response Center within 24 hours of occurrence of 800-424-0201, complete with the reports therefore after filled with the FRA pursuant to Statute 234.9 of this part activation failure report and Title 49 CFR Part 225.11 accident incident report. Each telephone report must state the name of the railroad, name of the type, and the title and the telephone number of the individual making the report, time and the date of location, accident, U.S. Department of Transportation, AAR, grade crossing identification number, circumstance of the accident, including the operation detail of the grade crossing, warning device number of the persons killed or injured, if any, maximum authorized train speed, and Posted highway speed limit if known. 234.9 grade crossing signal system failure reports. Each railroad shall report to the FRA within 15 days of the activation failure of the highway grade crossing warning system. The FRA form number 618083 with the highway grade crossing warning system failure report shall be used in purpose completed within accordance with the instruction printed on the form. 234.11 state highway grade crossing action plan. Purpose of the section will reduce the collision with the highway grade crossing in the 10 states that have been made most highway grade crossing collisions on average during the calendar years 2006, 2007, 2008. The section does not restrict any other state with other entity would adopt the highway rail grade crossing action plan. The section does not restrict any of the states required to develop action plans under the section adopting a highway grade crossing action plan with additional more stringent requirements not inconsistent with this section. Application of the section applied with the 10 states that have had most highway grade crossing collisions on average during the calendar year 2006, 2007, 2008. Action plans. 1. The 10 identified states shall each at the top of the highway rail grade crossing action plan submit such a plan to the FRA for review with approval no later than August 27, 2011. The state highway grade crossing action plan. 2. 1. Identify the state specific solutions of the improving safety crossing with including highway grade crossing closures and grade separations. 2. Focus on crossing that is and experience multiple accidents and or at high risk of such accidents. 3. 5-year time period. D. Review and approval. The State Highway Grade Crossing Action Plan required under paragraph C of this section shall be submitted with the FRA review approval using at least one of the following mailed to the Associated Administrative Railroad Safety Chief of the Officer, U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Railroad Administration, 1200 New Jersey Avenue, Southeast Washington, D.C. 20590. Email rrs.correspondence@fra.gov. .gov. Will review the approve or disapprove of the State Highway Grade Crossing Action Plan submitted with the pursuant to paragraph D of the Section 60-day receipt. If proposed State Highway Rail Grade Crossing Action Plan is disapproved, the FRA will notify the affected state with the specific areas which the proposed plan is deficient in a state with a correct this deficiency within 30 days following the receipt of the written notice for the FRA. FRA may have a condition with awarding of any grant for Title 49 U.S. Standard Code 20158 with the 2019167 and 22501 with identify the state of the development of the FRA approved with the State Highway Grade Crossing Action Plan. Subpart C. Response and credible reports warning system malfunction highway rail grade crossing. We're going to continue reading. Alright, subpart C, response for the credible reports warning system malfunction highway grade crossing. 234-101, employee notification rules. Each railroad issued the rules requiring its employees to report the person designated by the railroad by the quickest means available to any warning system malfunction. 234-103, timely response to report malfunction. Upon receipt of the credible report warning system malfunction, railroad head of the maintenance and responsible for the warning system shall promptly investigate the report, determine the nature of the malfunction. The railroad shall take the appropriate action required in 234-207 until the repair connection of the warning system is completed with the railroad shall provide with the alternative the means of the warning highway traffic the railroad employs in accordance with the statute 234-105, 234-106, 234-107 of its part. Nothing in this subpart requires the repair of the warning system if acting in accordance with the applicable state and law, but the railroad will proceed with the discontinued dismantle of the warning system. However, until the railroad correction the discontinued dismantle of the warning system is complete, with the railroad shall comply with the subpart with the ensure the safety of the traveling public and railroad employees. 234-105, activation failure. Upon receipt of the credible report, warning system malfunction involving the active failure of the railroad having the maintenance responsibility for the warning system shall promptly initiate the effective for the when warn highway you to the railroad employee for the subject crossing by taking the following actions. Any of the prior train arrival of the crossing, notify the train crew with the report activation failure, notify any other railroads operating over the crossing, notify the law enforcement agency of the jurisdiction over the crossing of the railroad capable of responding to the control of very clear traffic and provide means of actively warning highway users of the approaching trains consistent with the following requirements. Appendix B of the summary chart with the alternative means for the warning if appropriately equipped with the flaggers warning of each for the direction of the highway traffic trains must proceed with the crossing of the normal speed. At least one uniformed law enforcement officer, including the railroad public and police officer, include warning to the highway traffic at the crossing. The trains may process at the crossing of the normal speed. If inappropriately equipped with the flaggers and provided with the warning of the highway traffic, but there's not at least one flagger provided with a warning of each of the direction of the highway traffic lanes must proceed at the caution through the crossing speed of not exceeding 15 miles per hour. Normal speed may be resumed after the locomotive has passed through the crossing if there is no appropriate equipment flagger or uniformed law enforcement officer providing the warning. 2. The highway traffic at the crossing of the train must stop before entering the crossing. Permit the crew member to dismount the flagway highway traffic and to stop. The locomotive may then proceed through the crossing of the flag, and the crew member the board the locomotive before the remainder of the train can proceed with the crossing. Locomotive audible warning device should be activated in accordance with the railroad rules regarding the approach of the grade crossing. 234-106 partial activation. Use of the receipt with a credible report with the partial activation railroad having the maintenance responsible for the warning system shall promptly initiate efforts of warning highway use of the railroad employee for the subject crossing in the same manner required for this false activation. 234-107 false activation. Upon receipt of the credible report with the false activation railroad having the maintenance responsibility for the highway grade crossing warning shall have the promptly initiate efforts of warning highway units railroad employees the crossing taking the following actions prior to the train arrival of the crossing. Notify the train crew and the report false activation. Notify any of the other railroads operating over the crossing. Notify the law enforcement agency overhead of the jurisdiction over the crossing. The railroad policy capable of responding to the control vehicle or traffic. Notify the law enforcement agency through the jurisdiction over the crossing of the railroad police capable of the responding control vehicle or traffic, providing alternative means actively warning highway users approaching the train that's consistent with the following requirements. See Appendix B of the summary chart or alternative means of warning. 1-1. If an appropriate equivalent flag is provided with a warning each for the direction of the highway traffic, the trains may proceed through the crossing at a normal speed. At least one uniformed law enforcement officer, including a railroad police officer, provide the warning to highway traffic in the crossing of the trains may proceed with the crossing at the normal speed. 2. If there is no appropriate equipped flagger provided with the warning east direction of highway traffic, if there is not at least one uniformed law enforcement officer providing the warning train with the locomotive, the cab car, the may proceed with the caution through the crossing at the speed not exceeding 15 miles per hour. The normal may be resumed for the locomotive the cab has been passed through the crossing. In the case of the shoving the move, crew member shall be on the ground to the flag of the train through the crossing. In lieu of complying with the paragraph C1 and 2 of the section of the railroad, temporarily take the warning system out of the service of the railroad, comply with all the requirements of statute 234-105. The activation failure of the locomotive audible warning with the device shall be activated in accordance with the railroad rules regarding the approach of the grade crossing. Alright, 234-109 record keeping. Each railroad shall keep the record pertaining to the compliance with the subject subpart required. Records must be kept with the forms provided with the railroad or electronic means with each of the railroads shall keep the following information with each with the credible report: warning system malfunction, location for the crossing of the highway, number to dot A or crossing inventory, time and the date of the receipt of the railroad report with the malfunction, actions taken with the railroad prior to the repair of the reactivation repaired system, time and the date of the repair. Each railroad shall retain for at least 1 year from the latest date of the railroad activity to respond to the credible report with the malfunction. All records referred to in paragraph A of the section requires records required with the kept that shall be made available to the FRA provided with the Title 49 U.S. Standard Code 20107, formerly 208, with the Federal Railroad Safety Act of 1970, Title 45 U.S. Standard Code 437. Subpart D, inspection, maintenance, and testing.